Welcome everybody and thank you for joining us for this Spring Talks panel, The Sustainable Fashion Paradigm. My name is Sally Ann Lim, I'm Insights Director at Spring Studios and I have the pleasure of moderating today's discussion. Sustainability has been top of the agenda for several years now and the effects of the ongoing pandemic have only served to further underscore its importance. Sustainability is ever evolving, transcends categories, geographies and generations. As our knowledge grows, consumer concerns shift, and industry conventions are challenged, the task of communicating sustainability is also evolving at pace. Although on the face of it, fashion doesn't necessarily feel like a natural fit for advancing concerns around sustainability, the sustainable fashion movement has really gained momentum in recent years and is revolutionizing the way that the industry operates. From increased transparency to more sustainable materials and production methods, the role of designers themselves as eco-advocates, and the rise of more conscious consumption. We're delighted to be joined today by three designers at the vanguard of this movement, YiChow and Maxwell Osborne of Public School, and Anna Foster of L.V.Denim. Founded by New York born and bred designers Dowie and Maxwell, Public School has made the crossover from street to mainstream fashion with its anti-prep, sharply tapered sportswear. The designers whose motto is to find perfection in imperfection are wildly respected in the industry for bringing a sense of cool to the brands that they collaborate with, as well as their sustainable approach. L.V.Denim is an innovative London-based denim brand with a strong fashion following, renowned for creating sophisticated made-to-measure jeans from discarded garments that would otherwise be destined for landfill. Spring has had the pleasure of working with these talented designers when we partnered with them on Restyle, Hyundai's pioneering upcycling project. And before we jump into today's discussion, I've just got a short video to play that really nicely captures what that project was about.
Hyundai had a problem with waste. Only 90% of its scrap materials were being recycled. So Hyundai asked which other industry with creativity at its heart and its own vision for solving ethical, environmental issues could help reimagine the remaining 10%. What if they joined forces with fashion and together worked towards the sustainable lifestyle we all aspire to? By seeing waste as a shared opportunity, not just a problem. So they did with the Restyle project. And together these unlikely allies inspired innovation. With a pioneering upcycling program, collaborating with 6 conscious fashion designers, Richard Quinn, Public School, Rosie Asselin, Alighieri Jewelry, Push Button and L.V.Denim. To produce an exclusive collection of valuable fashion pieces made with materials otherwise destined for landfill.
I found it really inspiring to see that what we're trying to do is similar to what Hyundai is trying to do.
It was interesting to see how we could take waste from a different industry and put it into a different context.
The limited edition collection they've created dropped online and in-store exclusively at Selfridges, a retail partner committed to shopping more sustainably. Proceeds going to the British Fashion Council's Institute of Positive Fashion. 31.8 million social media engagements. Integrated campaign reached 250 million globally. And encouraging more cross-industry collaborations in the future, driving sustainable design and manufacturing to save our planet. Hyundai Restyle 2020.
Great, thank you. So as part of today's panel, we'll have the opportunity to talk to Dowie, Maxwell and Anna about their experience of being part of that project and also discuss themes around fashion and sustainability more broadly. I should mention that if you have any questions that you'd like to put to our panelists, you can use the Q&A function in the webinar, and we'll try to keep about 10 minutes at the end for any of your questions. So to kick things off, if I can ask each of you in turn, what does sustainability mean to you personally? And more specifically, how has sustainability informed your design process and your label? Perhaps I can kick that one off with Anna.
Hi. Well, when I started the brand, I wanted to try and make something out of material that already existed. So I didn't really, I guess, take a traditional route. I looked at waste and decided what I could make from that. And then the patterns came last. So when I started looking at all the different materials I could use, denim just came up time and time again as being the biggest polluter, the amount of water you use. And so from that perspective, it just seemed like a no-brainer. Well, and also because the fact that, denim shopping, finding jeans is one of the most traumatic experiences for most, well, women, definitely. So I wanted to kind of try and create a very small collection that would be there forever. So I don't change the styles. The styles stay there. They never change. Just the colorways are the ones that are in kind of make the collection bigger. And so you can come back in 10, 15, 20 years time and the same style that you loved then will be available now. So looking at the denim, looking at trying to make things seasonless and have a longevity in life, that was really key for me, and also make good of all the damage that had been done in the original material of making of the denim.
Amazing. And how about for you guys at public school, Gary and Maxwell, how's it informed your kind of approach?
It's literally mimicking what Anna just said. I think when we started officially, when we made that shift, we were doing runway shows and we're doing, so many collections a year that just, it's a waste. Fashion is such a big pollutant that we really made that shift, which was very hard because we talked about it maybe for a year and a half before actually making that step, because it's a big financial risk, right? You're selling to accounts, you have a staff, you have money, you're on this schedule and you don't want to break that cycle. But we knew for us to make a better future, we had to break that cycle, money or not. And that was a hard call for us. But creatively, it's been fun because it is something where you get your raw materials, you see what you can use, if it's dead stock, if it's upcycled, things that are going to the trash, things that, we could remake out of something that's already been here and not take anything and not make anything new by taking old things. So that process has been creativity challenging, but really fun. I think when you get in a certain career, like it's always been one way and now we've changed it to another way where we are starting backwards. We are getting the raw materials. We could 50 yards. Okay, what can we make with this 50 yards? 200 yards, what can we make? If we have 1,000 yards, what can you make? And I think it's working backwards opposed to designing and knowing that you can make it however many units and however you want to do it. And it's scalable, right? This way we're doing it is not scalable. But we feel better consciously about what we're doing, and design-wise, just way more fun.
Amazing. And so I mentioned in the introduction, there's been a rise of what's been called conscious consumption in recent years. And I wonder if it's something that you've seen evolve in your own customer base. You talked about the fact initially that it sort of took a leap of faith commercially to go there. But have you seen that evolve in your own customer base? And do you have a sense of where that might go in the future?
I don't. I think that when we did it and the response that we've received, it's the consumers actually really enjoying the fact that, you take this stance and they're like die hard with it. And then there's the other consumers that like still operate on the old model and want new things all the time. And we want to, we're in the business of making clothes, but we want people to buy less and buy smarter, which is scary to say, but you want your garments to last the test of time, and you want consumers to really buy into the idea of owning something, keeping it, and if you are going to not keep it, somehow recycle it, and understand that part. But we've had some fall off, and then you've had some really great success when people talk about it, and especially if they're passionate about it, they love it, because you also want to make things that just don't feel or look like it's sustainable, or, like it doesn't, sometimes the connotation is that it's got to be patchworky and you're using this and it looks washed and beat up, when it's not that, when you could really create something new and make it look new when people don't know it, like using dead stock fabric from the factory floors, that collecting dust that they were never going to use from other clients in the past that are great fabrics that nobody wants, that we can use and make that something. So that's when consumers love it. when they see something new and know that it is sustainable, not even knowing that it is sustainable.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we live in a very aesthetic world. You can make something as environmentally conscious as possible, but if it looks terrible, no one's going to buy it. And so that's our job, to try and marry those two things successfully. And I have to say, I take my hat off to you guys, because I think if you have a successful business and then you decide to rip it, basically cut it down to the beginning and build it up again, oh my God, I can't. For me, in a way, maybe it was easier because I started from that. So I didn't really know how else not to do it. But I just, it's literally like what you're saying before is like, don't want anyone to buy as, I don't want people to buy as much, and we've got to stop everything that we did. And I just, it's a really scary operation for brands to do that. And I think when the consumer realizes how much time, how much effort it takes to make something in a conscious and careful and considered way, the consumer doesn't realize that now. Well, they are more now, because we just have appropriated so little value to clothes compared as we did 100 years ago. In 100 years ago, you could buy a dress for $20. You can still buy a dress for $20. Isn't that crazy? 100 years ago in 1920. That's when you realize that it's not. We're just devaluing the workmanship. We're devaluing how much it costs to make the material. And so we have just got to get the consumers to realize that if something costs $20 or $5 or £5 in my currency, that it literally costs probably like 30 cents or 30 pence to make it. Yeah. And then would you work for 30 cents an hour? No, you're not going to. So why should you demand that? And then you go and see the people that want to buy $5 clothing, but they've got a bag this big full of hundreds of those $5 clothings, when just buy one. Yep. So but I think what you're saying, Maxwell, about your consumer, we've found our consumers spending a lot more time reading information, watching the films. And if you are willing to give, literally, I strip myself bare and put everything that I do on there. You can ask a brand for more. And if it becomes too complicated to understand, then I think the consumer must realize that they're not being told everything. If there's, I think you have to kind of have really back to basic language so they don't get confused. And that's our responsibility.
For sure. It is that. Like, we do have to teach the consumer that is used to, buying fast fashion or buying fashion at a certain price that looks cool. And we have to explain why they're spending more on something. Because sometimes if we're taking upcycled goods and you break it down to sew it back up, that's like twice the work, right? So the factory,
oh my God, I was deconstructing a denim jacket today. It took 2 hours with my pattern cutter. And I'm like going, wow, this is going to be really expensive to do.
Yeah. And that's
but you have to, you do. That's what, it's really hard to explain that concept. And also when I first started making, if production goes wrong or things like that, or you make a collection, you don't like it, that is all waste.
Right.
And that freaks me out. I hate waste. And also wasting money, but then the costs to wholesale, to production, to retailing, lots of the consumers don't understand that actually the cost of a garment is not what you don't make that $1,000. That gets filtered back, for the production, the wholesaling, and then, the retailer, but they have their own costs. So it really does get divided. No one's sitting there with a massive pocket of money going, ching. Right. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think, it really is just giving people the understanding of what we're doing, but they have to come to grips on understanding where we are in the world, right? Like, they have to understand, instead of buying a $50 denim jacket and this one costs $350, it costs $350 for a reason, because we're making less of a carbon footprint, and it's easy for them to be like, I'll just spend the $50, because they haven't really believed in what's going on and how climate change and how we're really just fucking this earth up. Until they understand that, as much as we can give them, they need to learn that. I
think it's really I think it's really interesting to hear from you all how important education is to your role and how much you do see that as intrinsically part of your creative process and your role as designer. I wonder how you are looking to sort of amplify that conversation around sustainable fashion, because it does seem clear there's an appetite for education, but perhaps there's more to do and a journey to go on. So how and where are you doing that?
I think it's being transparent, and what Anna was saying is really like telling the consumers and letting them know if it's a video, if it's a panel like today, if it's all these different things that we could start to really make it inclusive and get other brands on board and everybody talk about it so everyone understands it. I think it starts from there. We've developed this fabric, which is like recycled and organic cotton, which is just like a better version blank that we first were going to use for public school. But then the bigger idea was like, we should have other brands buy into it. Why are they buying, the blanks that are just, again, polluting the earth when you could just buy a better blank, which is doing less of a carbon footprint. So we've opened this up to other brands to buy into this fabric, from, to cut and sew t-shirts and hoodie weight French terries, because we got to open up the conversation and it's got to be bigger. We learned that from Eileen Fisher when we did a collaboration with her and did her tour at the Tiny Factory, and what she does there is amazing on taking back her goods and she tells her story. But it is a business, right? So sometimes you do still have to sell some things, but what's great there is what she's doing is she does still make production, but then she has this whole Tiny Factory where you get your discount if you bring in your old product, and then you could buy into the new renew product, renew clothing. And that's something that she's been doing great with, and got over 1 million pieces back and counting, so we're trying to do the same thing and really make it inclusive and tell people what it is and be transparent. Even if it's against your other competition, it's like, it's not really competition anymore. We're all in the same boat, we're all living on this earth. We all got to do it together.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about collaborating, isn't it? And kind of learning from each other. You said, you were taught by her, and it's not being closed so that, you always can do better. I'm striving to make things better and trying to strive to find different ways to use even material that I would have not considered 2 years ago. So I'm now working on ways of actually making that material viable. And I think that's always your continual goal, to make smaller and smaller and more destroyed scraps of viable material again, rather than, because that's what sustainability means, really, isn't it? It's like the status quo not changing. You're creating something new, but you're trying to leave the level as it was when you started. And that's kind of a bit of a layman's term, because sustainability is, well, especially when you guys started before me, but in 2017, nobody really was talking about it. And you had some incredible pioneers such as Ursula de Castro, and, as part of Fashion Revolution, literally banging their heads against the wall, going, listen to me. And everyone's going, nah, it's fine. I mean, I was a stylist. I mean, I still am. And so I went to shows for years and years and years, watching it and not even questioning some of these practices, or because you're blinded by the beauty, I guess, of what you're seeing. And you kind of like, oh, even if you, and I honestly didn't think about it. I really, really didn't, until someone, and I sometimes I find I'm boring myself. Hannah, who works with me, I'm actually going, oh my God, I'm telling the same story again. But you're hoping that you might be repeating and boring someone, but you're also going to be having your eyes opened. You're opening someone's eyes as well. And if you just change one person's perception, then, because I say that it takes the same amount of water. It used to take the same amount of water to make one pair of jeans that one person drinks in 13 years. Now, because normally they talk about litres and gallons, and I can't even tell the size of a postage stamp compared to the size of a building. I've got no quantify, but if you quantify it, that, my son is 13. So a pair of jeans that I've got from the 70s or 80s, it took the same amount that he's drunk all his life.
That's crazy.
And then you think there are more jeans than people in the world. And then you're like, you've got, it's trying to make people understand in a way that you're not lecturing. You're saying, I'm not perfect, but this is me trying to do my part, and everybody, however small it is, can do that. Even if it comes to making sure you're recycling your food and your waste properly.
All of it.
Properly, yeah.
I think
also
sorry, Derry, go ahead.
Sorry, just equally important is that we, as designers, we all have sort of other projects that we work on, right? Anna's saying that she's still a stylist, and so I think it's also about carving out areas within the other projects that we work on to make sure that we're holding our standards to the same level on all the different projects that we work on, whether it's designers are always consulting or freelancing for another brand, or if it's a collaboration, for us, any collaboration that we enter into has to have a certain standard of consciousness that's built into the project, like legally built in. And so I think that that's super important as well, is that you're carving out those same sort of responsibilities and passing that on to the different projects and the different partners that you're working with. And ultimately, if enough people are asking to do the same thing or to keep the same standard, the standards themselves raise up. So that's an important thing to remember, that like logistically you can implement that into all the different projects and or partners that you're working with, for them to include that in their process as well.
I think that's really interesting. There's obviously been a number of collaborations in this space, and it was interesting to hear, Maxwell, that you're sort of looking to collaborate within your own industry and sort of making that material available to other designers and brands. Perhaps you can talk to me a little bit more about the kind of qualities that you look for in a partner, whether that be within your own industry or looking more broadly across categories, such as, the collaboration with Hyundai was obviously a unique pairing of automotive and fashion, which hasn't really been seen before. What is it that you need to look for in that collaboration that is the key to success?
I think for me, because when you were saying, Daid, about you have to have the same values, and when we were talking about it right from the beginning, it was really important that the products that we all made, we didn't make a whole collection or hundreds of pieces. We made a small amount that would actually be sold properly, not as just a project or a fancy or look how amazing we are, we've braided this thing out of waste. It had to be commercially viable. Otherwise, that collection of those 10 pieces or whatever, if that just sits doing nothing, then we're being hypocritical because we're not selling it. So it didn't work. So for me, it was essential that these pieces were limited. There was small about them that became desirable, that people wanted. Because it leaves people wanting more, which means that the next project that happens, you're going to be hankering after that because you're going to want to see what's created, and you're going to make sure you didn't miss out, that you missed out last time. So for me, if they'd said to me, I want you to create 200 pieces and then we don't worry about what happens to it afterwards, then I would have been out, because otherwise someone's going to turn around to me and say, you know what, we saw all that in a kind of sample sale, you didn't really sell it. And for me, when we put ourselves out there as having, we're morally accountable brands, that we have to be, we have to put our money where our mouth is, or our mouth where our money is. I don't know which way it goes round, because it's really, it has to have those same values. And I think if, making decisions is also sustainable decisions is also a lot of common sense. And if you know that you don't like the answers, then it's not right. And I think that comes within brands, within fashion brands, or within outside of brands. So Hyundai and fashion brands worked really well because they listened, and I'm sure you guys were having the same conversations, that they listened and accepted. And when we were having material brought over here, we had to kind of change the way they were sending it because it was quite wasteful. So I said, look, can we do it in a different way so the carbon footprint isn't huge and we are making sure that we are maximizing the use of both sides waste.
Right.
Amazing. And public school, Maxwell and Dowie, what have you learned from your experience of collaborating with Hyundai? I think it's interesting to hear from Anna how you were sort of challenging some of Hyundai's methods. Did you have any similar experiences yourself working on the Restyle project?
Yeah, I think it's, it's important to focus on cross industry exploration, where you're not only just looking internally within the fashion industry to see what you can do there, but there's waste across every single industry. So obviously finding new sort of waste streams, if you will, is important, because every industry is going to pollute. And so if you can figure out different avenues and turning those waste streams into raw material streams, that's part of the road to get to circularity, where you are able to have sort of this regenerative idea of creating, right? You're taking things that have gone to waste or will wind up in landfill, and recreating that, regenerating that into a raw material that'll help you build something that would have taken some virgin material or something that didn't exist before that you would need to create. So I think that was the most important lesson, is sort of looking at different industries or cross industries for opportunities to source raw material.
Yeah, so one industry's trash is literally our treasure.
Mm-hmm.
All the leather pieces we were getting, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, yay, it's like happy days, because, trying to find a legitimate source of waste leather was incredible. But then, you think it's so obvious, but it's not to everyone. So having conversations, and I unfortunately, one of the kind of downsides of the pandemic is that you don't have these opportunities to talk to people. You don't sit and meet. You can't, I bump into someone in the street and you just brainstorm for 5 minutes, which is just chatting. And then you're like, oh my gosh, let's do that. Great. Okay, bye. And off you go on your way to the supermarket. And, it's that kind of conversations that you want to have, but only by doing that can you work out what part of your waste is valuable to someone else.
What was the biggest surprise for you working with Hyundai? What was the biggest thing that you learned from them, and maybe what they showed you about yourself through that collaboration?
Ooh. I'm trying to dissect that. Gosh, I mean, I think I didn't realize personally how much of the car industry could be upcycled. They say they're upcycling 82% of their old cars into new cars, and I think if one car group can do that, then surely it sets the bar for other. But it also, it just gave me the opportunity to kind of create something, a brand new piece for me. So I learned, I guess it taught me to kind of really go outside of my comfort zone of just doing the jeans and creating more pieces. So I guess I learned, but in a positive way. So it didn't really teach me, it allowed me the opportunity to grow. And now that's just expanding. So I'm just like, yeah, there's so many things that opened my mind. So I can't see anything than one of the best experiences I've had, actually.
Yeah, I think for me personally, it was actually just thinking that a car industry can work with designers and build something, right? Like it is so simple that, yeah, there is leather, there's so much, there's the webbing of the seat belts,
yeah.
Things that we use the airbag and the webbing of the seat belts to make a vest. And, before, you're sitting in your cars and you're in a car almost every other day, and you just never even think about using those goods for fashion. We sit there, at least for me, I think about other brands to work with or something that's like within the wheelhouse, but you actually think about cars having so much leather or cloth, things that you could really use creatively and make it better for us. And I just never even thought about cars. And then that triggered like, what else can you work with, you know, outside of cars? What other industries can we touch into that has waste that will work for us? You know, that was the biggest takeaway for me.
It's really interesting to hear. I think a common theme coming out of everything we're talking about is sort of common sense being an arbiter of good taste in many cases, and just being very simple and transparent. And I think, Anna, you've got some really interesting analogies that really kind of help to put it in perspective. When you're talking about sustainability and how it informs your practice, how do you do it without falling into the usual traps around greenwashing? And what do you see really kind of resonates with your consumer base? What is it that sparks with them when you kind of get onto this subject that maybe they wouldn't have thought about before?
I honestly think it's keeping everything super simple and with facts that you can actually back up information. I mean, I get asked all the time, where did you find the statement there are more genes than people in the world? And I said, well, I didn't. I just figured it out because the World Health Organization says there's nearly 8 billion people in the world. And then we have Newsweek stating that we produced 4 billion pairs of jeans last year. So, you know, doesn't take a lot to figure out that in 2 or 3 years we've created more genes than people. So I made that very large statement myself. But it is about just creating two facts and trying not to complicate issues with too many scientific facts about it, but just on a human level. You know, I want to leave something behind me that exists after and leave a better place behind me. So I'm not like one of those, I don't know, just a polluting car, you know, big black exhaust fumes coming out. I don't know what I want to say as an analogy, but maybe grass coming out of the back of the car or something like that. I was going off track there, but do you know what I mean? It's just it's being really honest and simple. That I guess when the companies get bigger and there are lots more kind of boxes, ticks and explanations to give. But for me, I can't say personally about brands that are greenwashing because I don't have enough time, unfortunately, to look into all of those. All I know is that I am a super sustainable denim brand, and that's my job, is to kind of maintain that that kind of ethos towards my brand and make sure I'm honest to that. And I'm sure eventually brands that greenwash will come out in the wash. Sorry, was that a bad pun or a good pun? I don't know.
Continue the analogy. It's been interesting. It's very clear from what you've all been saying that your ambitions in terms of sustainable design do far exceed the fashion industry. But it's interesting, given that you guys are really at the vanguard of leading this movement within your own industry. What do you think would make the biggest impact in the fashion industry from a sustainable perspective? And perhaps what would you personally like to see implemented or indeed even legislated to try and bring about this change?
Oh, gosh. I guess it's policy, a government policy, isn't it? You know, ensuring that it's a big responsibility. The fashion industry have a big responsibility because as we said before, we shut our eyes to the things that happen. And I think fast fashion brands there should be levies on what they're doing. I guess I don't know enough about it to kind of say the right path of that. But I think certain fast fashion brands have to give back in other ways, and I think government policies have to force them to do that.
Yeah. I kind of think it feels like, you know, in New York, there's like the A, B, and C for health and restaurants. Like you have to post where you are, you know, cleanliness. Is it an A? Are you a B? Are you a C? They close you down if you're a D, I think. And I think there needs to be some type of government, type of legislative, some law where people have metrics to hit. If you're in the business of fashion, you should hit some metrics, and it should be very transparent. It should be like a directory where you know your brand is doing this much towards the world and the carbon footprint. You know, some of the newer brands do that where they have their websites talk about their carbon footprints. But if there was a governing body and is very transparent to all people and that everybody has to be involved, I think that would help, like you'd be like, damn, my favorite brand is polluting the earth this much. Like maybe I should think about it in different ways. And I think that would kind of help also steer the consumers into thinking in the right way.
Yeah, there are lots of kind of organisations that have popped up over the last couple of years. B Corp was one of the first ones, but when I tried to, I was too small because there was only employee one in the business, so I couldn't answer all the questions. And it literally took me 24 hours of like, and I was like, oh, I can't even carry on. And then there are other agencies you have to pay to get their stamp.
Exactly.
And so actually anyone can pay money to get to say the right things. So I think it has to be a universal way of,
exactly.
But I'm sure there are, complexities around that as well.
I'm sure. But I mean, if they do it, like you think about restaurants, it's like the health inspector comes and it's that one office, they go to every restaurant and they make sure it's abiding by this instead of like paying for because the certificates and all that, you have to pay for the site, you have to pay, and you're like, does anybody even really know? Like we're doing this and some people aren't even really aware. But when you see this, and I keep using the restaurant analogy, but like, when you go, you see it right there in the front window and it's clear. I'm not eating at a C. And if I knew the brand was like a C, I wouldn't buy that brand, Yeah,
and I think there has to also be potential tax breaks for, brands that maybe produced within the same country. So your carbon footprints are, it's common sense. If you guys produce in New York, it's common sense. Your carbon footprint is going to be smaller than someone that does. My factory's 5 minutes up the road, and so it's obvious. So if you decide to offshore, but then that's going to probably create loads of, I don't mean to upset anyone, but we've got to try and think. It's a bit like, in London now, they're shutting all the roads, so you can't drive through certain boroughs, and that is creating so much anger in London at the moment. But it's for the better good, but it's also upsetting a lot of people, understandably. But to get things moving in the right ways, you're going to have to upset a lot of people.
Yeah, I think on a larger level, though, I think for a lot of brands and the thinking for a lot of people within the industry is like, just make more green product, right? If everyone can, adjust their process and be more responsible, then we'll be in a better place. But I think that's probably, too small a thinking that the real key, and this goes back to a point that you made earlier, was that we have to look at consumption. We have to look at the idea of what consumption means, in the US, in England, around the world. And we have to be able to change the dynamic of how people consume. And, as creators, as manufacturers, wholesalers, we're sort of at the forefront of creating product that is being consumed. And if the dynamic or the idea of consumption doesn't change in consumers' minds, then we can make all the green product in the world. We're just making, more product ultimately at the end of the day. So we, somehow need to change the dynamic between brands and consumers. And it has to go beyond being a purely transactional experience of, we're making a pair of jeans, you give me your payment information, we ship the jeans out to you, and then we'll see you next time when you want to buy another pair of jeans. That relationship needs to change ultimately. And that's, I think, the bigger task at hand is like, how do we change the way that people think about consuming product and how much product that they really need to consume. And so whether that's, placing more value, another point that was made earlier, we've been continually historically sort of devaluing, product, whether it's clothes, fashion, whatever it is. You know, the idea that you can get anything at any time, at any price, you know, that has now been systematically ingrained in how people consume and people shop. And so if there was a way to, you know, change the way that people can access product or access goods or access fashion, not purely, you know, not making it just transactional, not making it just about sort of money, you know, that they have to do some sort of good, or that they have to be active in a certain way, and then that allows them access into the product that they want. You know, that sort of thinking is really going to be what is going to sort of set us on a new path to get beyond, you know, just putting the Band-Aid of saying, well, let's just develop better ways of making products. Sure, that of course that's what we want to get at, but ultimately it's, you know, it's sort of like climate change. Like, you know, let's figure out ways to, you know, carbon capture machines and take, you know, pulling carbon out of the sky and dumping it into, you know, space, you know, like these wild ass ideas, instead of saying, well, let's figure out how to just cut down carbon emissions, right? So I think that's the thinking, and that's the approach that we need to have within our industry.
And none of it is easy.
No, absolutely not. I think that's a really nice macro place to kind of bring it all around. Obviously, the topic of the panel discussion was the sustainable fashion paradigm. So I think, Dowie, you've captured it really nicely. I'm conscious you've really set fire to the Q&A. Obviously, you've really captured the imagination of our attendees. So I just want to leave the last 15 minutes to answer some of their questions. So going on to the chat, first question from Rochelle. Do more consumers need to invest in having a capsule wardrobe? When disposing of our clothes, how can we ensure that we're sending our old items off for recycling?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, recycling clothes sort of is like recycling plastic, you know, like.
You think you're doing the right thing, but invariably, you know, when you give your clothes to a charity shop, so many of the charity shops just cannot absorb all the clothes they get. So textile associations will pick it up. They're asked to. That's just how the whole system works. And then unfortunately, all these textiles get sent. We don't have the manpower, the factories in the West, in like the first world. So when we send all our textiles crap to third world, they source it and then we buy it back, and you get it back. You buy it back from a vintage store. Cha-ching! Right. I just like that. It blows my mind that we do that. So I just think also, I think part of what we have so much, you know, there is certain ways that we, I think as each country has to probably deal with their own waste. I think it would be really important for us to do that. But I think, you know, try and repair your clothes before you throw them away. I think definitely or pass them on to someone that you know might want them. You know, friends do kind of a swap. It is actually possible. It is actually quite easy to do that, you know, or you highlight some things that you want. I've got certain items that I'm going to give to my daughter that I'm not going to wear anymore. So I'm packaging them all up with little tags of when I wore them, why I love them. Mm-hmm. And so when she's 18, she'll get a whole wardrobe of things. And, you know, it's just that, I think it's just the kind of, but you're right. I think the lady that asked the question about keeping a capsule wardrobe, you probably know what you want to wear. You probably wear the same thing every day, but it doesn't mean you can't add things in. But then you go to places like By Rotation when you can borrow those clothes for a day, 2 days, and then they have they get given back to the person, and then someone else rents them for 2 days or a week. Yeah. So I think you can have your capsule wardrobe, but then take from these rental companies when you need a pair of, I don't know, gold high heels or something like that, you know, you can borrow them for the day.
Yeah. Or just, you know, an easy way is just buy things that you never want to toss out or give away. Yeah. Right. Just invest in pieces that you'll have for a lifetime, that will be able to stand the test of time, that you can eventually, you know, pass on to your kids or to someone directly. You know, I think that's the easiest way, is just don't buy clothes that you don't think that you will keep for the rest of your life.
Right. Well, that one's always hard for the consumer. I always feel like some people just love to dress up and be different daily. Yeah. You know, it really is just trying to touch as many people to understand, to try to buy that way. Obviously, some people are not going to. It's just hard for some people to even get to understand and get their head around. But yeah,
because as soon as a consumer buys something, then that responsibility of that garment belongs to them, whether it's £5, £50, £500. It is, you give that the consumer then has to take, I wear this as much as I would wear, you put the same value. It is a value of an X amount. It doesn't have a specific monetary value, but you have to want to love this piece as much as you would do anything else. And whether that, it could be a high street piece, it could be a designer piece, but the consumer has the responsibility when it comes into their possession, I believe, to do the best what they can with it.
Great. We've got a couple of questions that are sort of asking about this collaboration space, which I know is a theme from the discussion. Flora asks, do you worry that these big brands cross-collaborating with smaller brands that have spent years building up their understanding of sustainability are going to continue utilising the shared knowledge from your sustainable brands? Or is it more of a marketing material that big brands are using just for one collaboration and then back to business as usual?
I mean, we find on our end, like bigger brands, if we're collaborating, like with a Nike or a New Balance, that they are sort of even more light years ahead of where we are from a sustainability understanding. They have a larger, responsibility than we do because they're contributing more than we do, obviously. And so, it's about picking and choosing the right partners to partner with to make sure that they have something that you can leverage, whether it's education, resources, understanding, and have that sort of pass on to you. So no matter which way it goes, if it goes from you to the big brand or from the big brand to you, the understanding and the education needs to be passed along. There's no good. We do no one any good by sort of holding on to, best practices because we can't, not one brand is going to sort of save our industry. So we need to collaborate, and that exchange of information needs to happen no matter which way it comes from. But 9 out of 10 times, or 10 out of 10 times, the bigger brands that we're working with, have that knowledge and have, the resources in order for us to make better product responsibly.
Great. Next question, how is consumer perception changed to understand some of the barriers to improving sustainability, for example, the cost of labour to rework jeans, which may increase the cost of an item of clothing and encourage the consumer to be more accepting of this higher cost, thus making more circular work economically viable? So it's like, how do you, I guess, open consumers' eyes up to the sort of mechanics of the circular economy and get them to really buy into that as more of a sustainable model moving forward?
Yeah, it really falls on us to really educate the consumer on why it costs that much. If it's a note in the package when you buy something explaining or showing the consumer why something costs this much, because it's twice the labor and you're losing more, there's like, you're trying to take as much waste from it and use every piece, and it's not just an easy, here's a pattern, here's our fabric, go to work. This is like, it's really more methodical. Each piece has to fit somewhere, and that's what they're paying for. And that's
it's more of a bespoke, isn't it? It becomes more a bespoke piece. It's not just a manufactured thing on a machine that's churned and someone could do with their eyes closed. Yeah. It's, personally for me, it's me climbing mountains of denim and literally sifting through textile association hubs, sourcing those pieces, which are then cleaned and so then put together and then they're placed, and it takes hours and hours and hours rather than 10 minutes of, not saying that, but it takes a lot of time. So you have to think that there's a lot of prep, there's a lot, because each piece is approached with a completely fresh pair of eyes every single time. So it's, you're right, it's just educating. And that sounds so patronizing. It's not, because I feel I'm educated by kind of even speaking to you guys on so many things. And it's whether it's Hyundai or another collaborator educating you. And every day you kind of just learn a little bit more, or something clicks or something makes sense. And so you want to pass that on as soon as something's been perfected. And also it takes a while to make it right internally before you can show the rest of the world, because you don't want it falling apart. So that takes time because you're dealing with irregularities of material.
Another question that's come in: the pandemic has given us pause to reevaluate the seasonal fashion calendar and our approach to Fashion Week in general, particularly in light of the push for greater sustainability in the industry. What are your thoughts on this, and how do you intend to show your collections and your pieces moving forward?
Well, for us at public school, we've gotten off that calendar. Once we made that decision to be, socially conscious and sustainable, we totally knew that runway shows and drops like that were not going to be suitable for us, because you do a show and half the collection sometimes you're making just for the show to get the point across, and then it sits there and then it's just a waste. So we knew we wanted to cut out waste, and that meant cut out shows for us. So it's now drops, it's thoughtful drops. It's what you need at that very moment. It works for us. If it's the fabric that led that conversation, usually it is. That's how we've been doing our drops. Like, it sucks for the consumer if you expect something in spring, summer collection, and then fall, winter. Now it's seasonless. It is what it is. You're going to get it when we have it. As we start, we're still learning ourselves, but it is something that we just want to cut waste. And that meant we had to stop doing shows.
I think we've probably got time for a final question. So I'm going to kind of join two together. So we've had two questions. One that asks, how can product newness be shifted to a more sustainable approach without creating as much leftover or surplus? And somebody else who's asked whether you think the pre-order model may play into the future of fashion, and how that might work.
Yeah, pre-order for sure. I mean, that's something that we've experimented with too, is just putting it up on site and taking orders, and we only make as much as we get orders from. And so that will delay certainly the amount of time it'll take before a consumer can get the goods, because they're not pre-made and you're not buying into the stock. But I think ultimately, that's another relationship between brand and consumer that needs to change. It's like, cool, you want something, we're on this pre-order so that we're not making more than we need to, so we don't have waste, we don't have anything that ends up on a sale rack, that eventually ends up in the landfill. We're taking the time to sort of make it specifically for you, for the person that ordered it. And so again, those are the type of things where the brand consumer dynamic needs to change. But yes, that is a very easy way for brands to sort of cut out waste, is through a pre-order model.
And it's also kind of it's a bit of a snapshot into the exclusivity of what used to be the fashion industry. Insiders used to be able to pre-order pieces that were only available 3 months later, and or a made to order system of a month later, which is what we do on the jumpsuits and some of the jackets. But then also you realize that you're getting a piece particularly bespoke, made for you, and I think which no one else is going to be able to have again. And I think that's really special, and I do believe consumers are wanting that unique piece that no one else is going to have, and I believe more and more people will be wanting that.
Great. Well, I'm conscious of time. I think that's a really nice and positive place at which to bring us to a close. A huge thank you to Dowie and Maxwell and Anna for joining us today. And thank you also to all of you who've tuned in. I think we've set record numbers of attendees. So thank you for your engagement in this topic and all of your questions. I am conscious that we haven't had a chance to answer all of them. So rest assured, we'll try and follow up with those questions. And if you do have any additional questions, please do get in touch. You'll be able to find details of how to contact us on your registration email from this webinar. I should also mention that Spring are currently offering a complimentary consultation to discuss how you can create more compelling sustainability communications for your brand. So do get in touch if you'd like to arrange a session. And don't forget to check out our latest Spring Thinks report on sustainability, which is available via our website and also on our LinkedIn. Thank you very much indeed to our amazing panelists. Thank you to all our attendees who tuned in for all of your questions, and goodbye. Thanks very much.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you for having us.